In this sequel video, I compare two of the biggest countries in Africa, Kenya and Nigeria. I have been traveling the world since I was 6 months old, traveling across continents and many countries. Africa is still my greatest fascination. This is one video that will give you the knowledge you need about these two countries. So, let's go. Cost of living, right, is the next one, right? Now, that's a key one you really want to listen to, right? Because when you're going to a country, you want to be able to make the right choices, right? You don't want to blast all your money, you want to save, you want to be able to do the right things. Cost of living in Kenya and Nigeria, but I find them both relatively expensive, right? Both of them are expensive, the cost of living. And I'll tell you why, right? Over the couple of years in Nigeria, the prices of things have really gone up, right? Food is more expensive than it's ever been before. Things like rice and potatoes and tomatoes that you could just sort of get easily and affordable, those things are expensive right now. Like 5 tomatoes are like 1,000 naira. If you look at that in dollars, that's like 60 cents, right? It's not so much in dollars. When you look at that in shillings, it's probably about 100 shillings, right? For like 4 or 5 tomatoes. In Kenya, you could get like 4 or 5 tomatoes when we were there for like 50 or 60 or something like that, right? So slightly cheaper than Nigeria, right, for tomatoes, and you could actually buy in bulk and you could actually get it cheaper. But over here in Nigeria, I find out it's really much more expensive in terms of food, but maybe by about 20%, right? Because Kenya as well, there's some things that are really cheap in Kenya that are affordable, but I find that the cost of food is probably relative in those countries. Bread is like 120 Kenya shillings, which is like $1. In Nigeria, bread is about 1,700, which is about $1.3. So I think the cost of living in terms of food is very relative, right? In those countries, it's about the same, but Nigeria is slightly more expensive, you know. If it's slightly more expensive, I find Nigeria slightly more expensive. Another thing you want to think about cost of living is petrol, right? You're going to have your car. Sometimes you're going to have like cooking gas you want to cook. So you want to think about petrol, right? The cost of petrol and gas in Kenya, I found it through the roof. It was expensive. A liter of fuel in Kenya when I was there was like 200 and, okay, I think right now it's about 180 Kenyan shillings, which is in Naira, about 2,200 Naira for 1 liter. In Nigeria right now, the price of petrol is about 800 Naira per liter. And the Nigerians are screaming, oh my goodness, it's expensive, drop it down. In Kenya, 1 liter is like 2,200. So when I was there, I found it like, oh my goodness, it was expensive, right? It was even more expensive in South Africa, by the way. You know, petrol was expensive in Kenya, you know, so, but after a while you get used to it. And it's because Kenya says, you know what, they're charging you for road tax, your petrol money is working. So I think Kenyans get it and they pay for it. I think there was a point where they struggled to sort of try to drive it down, but I think they're used to it now, right? So, but the cost of petrol was expensive. Another thing that I found expensive as well in Kenya was cooking gas. Cooking gas for like a 12.5 cylinder, the sort of cylinder is about, you know, those ones that are about like this. In Kenya, one was like 4,000. Anytime we refilled, it was about maybe 4,000 with total gas or something, you know? And when you convert that to Naira, that is like 49,000 Naira. That's like an easy 50,000. That gas cylinder that Kenyan shillings pay 4,000 shillings for, which is 50,000 Naira, in Nigeria is about 14,000 Naira. About 64, maybe about 64 shillings is what it comes to for a whole gas, right? 64 shillings, I don't know if my math is right, but in Naira, it is 14,000. In Kenyan shillings, no, Kenyan shillings is 1,000. 14,000 Naira is about 1,000. So the gas cylinder you're paying 4,000 for in Kenya, and Nigeria is 1,000. So gas, petrol, those things are cheap in Nigeria, affordable. If you're gonna get a car, you're gonna have a good life. You can top your car, you can drive, you can speed. So if you're a foreigner coming in, great. You would really enjoy that relative cheaper cost. But in Kenya, yeah, I think Kenya is one of the countries where I think in where we've lived, the cost of petrol, I found it's a bit steep. I think Uganda is probably parity or slightly cheaper, but I found it a bit steep, right, for Kenya. So thinking about your cost of living, you want to take those things into consideration. Food, I told you, food prices are about the same. 1 kg of rice in Kenya when we were there was about 220 depending on the kind of rice you want to buy, right? You can also buy the 5 kgs, but 220 was really the going price for like your rice. In Nigeria, about 1 kg is about the same price when you convert it, maybe 10 or 15% more expensive. So like I said, food is about the same thing, right? You'll almost be thinking about it. I always try to compare rice, beans, and those grains, right? To give you a good range of your cost of food as well. But be ready. In Nigeria, you get a lot of the more affordable foods are like your starches, your yams, your rice. So if you're somebody that eats a lot of greens and healthy food, then you're definitely going to be paying a little bit more for those kind of greens, cabbages, and those kind of things. So bring your bucks if you're coming to Nigeria. In Kenya, if you're going to go in there, I find a little bit of balance. Now, Kenya is a very grainy country. There's several kinds of beans. There's your small beans, green beans, black beans, soldier beans. It was in Kenya, I saw all the kind of beans you could ever think about in this life. And people farm, they export it. I mean, when you're talking about proteins and legumes in Kenya, you're going to enjoy yourself. I don't know, it's amazing. And they have all these kind of things they make from it. So you're going to have all sorts of beans. You're going to have a good time. Yellow beans was nice. You have to try the yellow beans. I found it as the better beans, because when we were in Kenya, we tried to look for like Nigerian food or Nigerian beans that we can get. But when we moved to Kenya, we did not have to look for Nigerian beans. We're like, whoa, this beans is nice. We forgot about Nigerian beans and just jumped straight into Kenyan beans. It was nice. It was really good. So Kenya is really good. When we were in Kenya, one thing that we thought we were going to really miss was bread. We fell in love with Kenyan bread, right? There was like Supalo, Festive, the different ramifications of bread in Kenya, which was nice, but they have a lot of sugar. Kenya, they put sugar in the bread. So if you're tasting the bread, you can actually it doesn't taste like cake, but you can tell they love sweet stuff. Kenyans love sugar. Even if you look at when they're putting sugar in their tea, Kenyans, they love sugar. Nigerian bread has sugar as well, but I think it's a bit more milkier, and Nigerians like this pull. If the bread is not pulling like chewing gum, like chingum, or like, it's just not gonna be it. Nigerians love that agege feel of bread. We looked for that in Kenya. We didn't get much of it. You could see some breads that are white, but you don't get that pully agege bread that you can just pull, and you can even mold like you're molding okele or like pounded yam or something. So we missed that, right? But Kenyan bread, we fell in love with it, right? Because it had flavor, especially Festive, right? That was my balance, right? We liked Festive. Once in a while, the kids like Supalo because of the sugar, but yeah, when I think about it now, Kenyan bread was not bad, and there's some good bread in Kenya, and there's some good bread. Over here, there's good bread as well. There's Old English, but it's priced over $1. It's about 2,200. There is Old English. There's the bread I just discovered as well. It's called Boku bread. I was walking on Obalende one day, and someone says, you know what, Dexter, you got to try this Boku bread. And I took the bread. Amazing bread, by the way. It could mold, it could fold, it had a good vanilla smell. It said it was bromate free, but for some reason it felt very poorly, right? But I liked it. It was nice. I think I'll buy it again. I've eaten it once. I'll definitely try it again. I like the Boku bread. So there's those ramifications, right, of that. And like I said, that's bread, right? And that's all under cost of living, right? So just think about that when you're moving. When I think about cost of living, it's another one where I'm torn to say 50-50, but maybe I'll just sort of skew over to myself and be a bit more decisive. And I would give the cost of living to Kenya. And that's also because I think housing, like I said earlier, in Nigeria tips it over the ballpark, right? So Kenya for me is like a better cost of living. If you're thinking about Kenya, Nigeria, the cost of living, Kenya wins that round big time. Quality of life. Quality of life, it's a no-brainer for me. I find out in Nigeria, the hustle is real. The quality of life you get almost starts from when you're in your office, when you're in your house. Depending on how your house is and how serene it is, you start to sort of feel that quality. But generally, I think when you hit the streets of Lagos or Nigeria, you sort of feel, you don't necessarily feel the quality like I'm living a premium life, like hallelujah, great glory, glory, glory. You sort of feel that there's some hardship, there's some toughness. You're living that quality of life in your air-conditioned car, but when you look outside, you almost feel that you could pull everybody into your car and everybody could live that sort of serene quality that you want to. So it's possible to live a high quality of life in Lagos, but if you think it's maybe like general or that the middle class is sort of just accessing a great quality, it's not necessarily so true. In Kenya, on the other hand, I found out that you could access that, right? Once in a while, you could still go to places, the air was good, the peacefulness, the serenity. You do see some guys selling in traffic, but they don't look like they're gonna like pass out the next day or chase after your car. I find the quality of life in Kenya is big. I find Kenya, when it comes to quality of life, I find the quality of life really, really good in Kenya. You know, I thought so. There was a lot of things you could do, places you could go. You could go to parks, you could have picnics, you could go to waterfalls, you could go ride your bicycle at some of these hazelnut. There was opportunities. There was just stuff that you could do. So I found the quality of life good. Your shopping quality was good. You go to the supermarkets, and I mean, the price difference between the supermarkets and the general trades, a little bit, but it's not something that breaks the bank, right? The average Kenyan can actually afford to do some shopping in the modern trade. And Nigeria, if you're going to the supermarket, you gotta be ready for it, right? You don't just have everybody go there, right? It's tough. You don't just do that, right? Don't do this at home, kids, you know, to the middle class kind of thing. For us, travel was key, right? We wanted to be in a country that allowed us to be able to access the US, to be able to access Nigeria, access South Africa, access Kenya. Where we're going to live was important, right? Because we wanted to see an airport or the best country that gave us a chance to travel cheap. There's some country that is very expensive. So when we're in Kenya, when I think about it, the cost of travel, you want to think about it. It's cheaper for you to fly out of Kenya than to fly out of Nigeria, virtually to anywhere in the world, right? Both countries are expensive, you know. If you're looking for a cheap country in Africa to fly out of, it's South Africa, right? But that's not in the league. We're not talking about those right now. If you're thinking about a cheap country to fly out of, Nigeria, Kenya is cheaper. Their currency is more stable, so it holds against the dollar. They have a lot more airplanes that come through the craft. So you get to have a lot of more opportunities to travel, connecting flights. So Kenya, KQ, sort of does that really quite well, and other airlines that come through. Nigeria, on the other hand, because of the currency, everything is done in dollars because the naira fluctuates a lot. So because of that, you're going to be paying a lot of money, right, in dollars, right, for that. So I find tickets, right, flying out of Nigeria to a South Africa or a Nigeria especially to South Africa, I can spend the same amount of money I used to fly to South Africa, a return trip, and I can go all the way to Arizona, right, from Johannesburg to Arizona for the same price, right? But it's a longer distance to Arizona. So I really don't get that high cost. It's expensive to travel within Africa. But if you're thinking about traveling, right, I find that Kenya is a better hub for travel, more connecting flights, cheaper prices. So I don't think you can go wrong with Kenya if you're going to be thinking about it from a hub perspective, right? So think about it. If you're moving here, you want to connect, you want to fly, Kenya will give you a better deal, you know, than Nigeria. So think about that and consider that in your preparations. Yeah, you got to think about that, you know. So yeah, so quality of life, I'll give it to Kenya. Boom. Okay, if you're thinking about the economy, right? Both economies, right, Nigeria and Kenya, we found them, they were both progressive, both growing, right? It's not like in some of the European markets where like it's flat or it's declining, like in the UK. So both countries are growing. Nigeria grew in its GDP like 3.5%, Kenya is about 6-7%. So Kenya is growing better and faster in terms of GDP and the size of the economy. And because the dollar holds very strong, right? For the past 1 year, the Kenyan shilling has held strong against the dollar. You know, it's about 1 to 129. So it's held very strong, right? Because of that, there's stability. You can predict what's going to happen in the economy. When you're importing things, it sort of keeps you a bit sort of steady. There's a lot of local exportation, you know, from Kenya. So there's an influx of the dollar, but there's still a demand for the shilling. I find the economy in Kenya more growing faster, a bit more arable, you know. Nigeria is great as well. The last 2 years was really bad for the currency after it was devalued. You know, but over the last 6 months, it's held its own. You know, it's held really held the dollar very steady. So I think Nigeria is looking at better times, right? With the kind of strength and the way the currency is holding, is looking at better times. But with Nigeria, sometimes it's very unpredictable. Sometimes the politician might blow a whistle and then whoosh, it sort of goes south. Sometimes there can be a conversation between, but I think in the last 3 months, even when those things happen, it doesn't sort of drop by so many basis points. It's also still very stable. So the Nigerian economy is starting to hold itself. You know, the hope is that it continues to drive downwards and get stronger as we see it. But Kenya has held its economy, right? Quite well. It's had its bouts where there was people fighting against tax. I also find that the kind of conversations and the kind of riots that happen in Kenya are a bit more sophisticated, right? Than the kind of conversations and riots and things that are fought for in Nigeria, right? People are fighting for taxes in Nigeria, in Kenya. Do not take the tax up to a certain level. It's a little bit more intelligent conversations and debates. In Nigeria, it's more a little bit like, you know what, don't take the fuel price up, the cost of wage of living. It's very union-like kind of arguments, which is probably not bad, but I find that the kind of conversations and riots and strikes in Kenya are a little bit more sophisticated, right? A little bit more robust, right? Versus just fighting with energy and hoping for minimum wages and stuff. I don't know what causes it, right? But I find those disparities a bit, I'm in Kenya and people are talking, hey, the tax has gone up, and I'm in Nigeria and people are like, give me bread, drop the price. That's what I think. I don't know. Maybe you guys think differently, right? But that's my feel, right? I'm not being biased here. I'm trying to make sure I'm as objective as possible, but that's sort of what I feel, right? And I'll look out for it more. I don't know if you have comments, right? Think about it, but that's my feel. That's what I feel, in terms of that. So in terms of economy, I'll give it again to Kenya. Not that Nigeria is not doing better, but I think Kenya's economy is in a better place, than Nigeria at the point at which we sit. At this point at which this video is out here. Business opportunities. I know you guys are hungry, right? By the way, Africa is going to be one of the fastest growing economies in the next couple of years. Going to be growing in double digits, faster than any other continent, population growth. So if you're thinking business opportunity, this is where you got to plan. This is where you got to come and score your goals, right? So think about Africa, right? This is the place to be. So Kenya, Nigeria. Things are definitely easier in Nigeria to open up a business. You need to go through some of those loopholes, right? Once in a while, to be able to get things working for you. If you're going to start a business, then you want to think a little bit about putting the price point right. Because with the cost of things, importation sometimes could get expensive. If you're importing, we really shouldn't be importing in Africa. We should be trying to create locally. But if you're importing, the price of things could go up and then you find yourself taking up your prices to be able to maintain some profitability. So you want to keep those things at the top of your mind, right, when you're working in Nigeria. And for you to be, of course, be able to take up your pricing, you need to really be a commodity that people demand for, right, that people are hungry for, right? Rice, beans, or something very differentiated, right, from technology that really meets the pain points of the people. Or have a super proposition, that is really, really driven to deliver value. Then, of course, you're talking, right, and you get it big time. And by the way, people are coming into Nigeria all the time, from China, from Pakistan, from Lebanon, to build in this country. So there's a lot of opportunities, right? So we got to really do that. In Kenya, the BRS is amazing. Is it the BRS, the Business Revenue Service, or BGR? One of them, right? It's called something, but they're the ones that do the business registrations. They're very fast. They're very good. I found them very good. Most of my friends that have registered there as well have found them very good. If you're dedicated, you can go there that day. If you have all your documents, they can process everything through the approvals and steps, and you could get everything done very quickly. So I know I find Kenya is a little bit more structured. It's a bit more expensive to open up a business because of what you're paying. Or is it the same? I think it's 12,000 for the name, 10,000 for that. I don't know. Maybe it's parity, but I find it a bit seamless and a bit easier. You get your documentation sent to you almost the next day by email. You print it out, you get it signed. I found out that I think it was seamless, right, is what I think. In the round for business opportunity, plus I think that Kenyans have higher purchasing power, you can probably make more margins, because of the price point that they're charged at. I'm just being objective, right? As much as possible. And I always tell my people that there's nothing as great as being able to travel and live across Africa, because as Africans, you must be able to go everywhere, right? And experience it's your continent, right? And one day when Africa is open, you can move from Uganda to Liberia and try to spend a night a week and actually choose what part of the world you want to live in, what part of Africa you want to live in, what do you want to plant, what do you want to grow, what do you want to produce, what do you want to export, what do you want to sell to the West, so that's my vision, right? That's my hope, right, for Africa one day. So when I'm giving you these videos and these points, it's quite objective, right? But I really want Africans to see Africa and for Africans to see the world, and for the world to see Africa. So if you're coming in, come in. Africa can't wait to have you. So that round was Kenya. Business opportunities, Kenya. Boom. Oh, yes. One very key point to think about when you're coming in, right, is culture and how you're accepted. Now, for these two countries, Nigeria or Kenya, there is no country in Africa that I've seen that embraces you like these countries. I mean, they embrace you, they accept you. You're not gonna get any feel of like you're coming to compete with us. They embrace you, they're open. Kenya does it very, very amazingly. Nigeria does it as well. You will never find a case where they say, go back to your country, you're not welcome here. Sometimes, they don't even look at your papers, especially like in West Africa. They just, you're welcome, right? In that space is what I find out, right? They do look at your papers, So, however, the difference is, in Kenya, I find that when they see foreigners, the civilians, both countries make money from tourism. More of course from Kenya. But the civilians, when they see foreigners, they're always looking for what to do to please to make the foreigners happy, right? And in that case, they can get exchanged for money, right? But I find Kenyans always sort of putting forth some sort of value, to say, what, we can get your couches, we can get your furniture, we can make this woodwork for you. Have you seen Kenyan art? Do you know our printer this? There's a little bit of that going out, to make sure they add value to the foreigners because they know they can get some of the cash, right? And they're always out to do that. And whether you're a Kikuyu, whether you're a Kamba, whether you're a Luo, everybody does that now, right? It's like everybody is becoming woke, right? And it's not just the Gen Z, right? But everybody's becoming woke, right? In Nigeria, I still find out that there's not a lot of deliberate calculations to actually find opportunities to make money from foreigners. You see pockets of supermarkets here selling some foreign food, but they're not deliberate about it, So I think it's a missed opportunity. And I think most Nigerians sometimes just look at foreigners and hope for like favors, tips, and maybe not like the average Nigerian, but maybe the most Nigerians on the street, right? You say a foreigner like, you just want to take advantage. Say, maybe give me 1,000. I haven't eaten. I'm not being hard on Nigeria because I've lived everywhere, right? And in Nigeria, I go everywhere, right? Whether I'm at Lekki or VI or Ikeja, it's sort of the same thing, right? Of course, when you get to VI, you don't see a lot of people doing that, but you sort of just feel that it almost feels like the foreigners are people to, maybe they can do something for you rather than you can do something. And when you do something, they get to give you money and then you get value for it, right? You need to exchange some sort of value, right? I don't necessarily see that. Maybe I've been gone for a while, but that's the vibe I feel, right? When I look at these countries, right? Kenyans, of course, you still have the people that want tips here and there, but generally they're like hustling, looking for ways to maximize and get money from foreigners, right? In the way that they add value. You go to their markets that they change every week. Like in Kenya, there's like a flea market, right? Where they sell traditional stuff every day of the week. Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays. So if a foreigner comes in on Monday, he goes there, boom. If he comes in on Tuesday, he goes there, boom. Maybe it's just because they have more foreigners, for visit and tourism than Nigeria. Maybe that's it, right? But that's my feel, right? So if you're thinking about acceptance, both countries, for me, it's 50-50. But Kenyans definitely have a way of making foreigners, deliver more value to them, and they get more empowered and money from it. And I think there's an opportunity for Nigeria in that space. This one, again, I'm on the fence because Nigerians are very welcoming. Nigerians might be loud. Nigerians must, and I must warn you, right? Nigerians might appear intimidating. They might appear loud. They might have like strong faces, like I've not eaten in a few days, but it's just because the Nigerian person is always on the hustle. He's always on the grind. He's always competitive. He needs to be able to make a point. So if you ever hear a loud Nigerian shouting and say, or being dramatic, it's not because he's like dangerous or he hates you or he's being too aggressive. He's just like that. deep in his heart, he's just like chill, right? And normal, right? You know, a lot of times, you know, we're loud, but we're soft inside, right? And I'm not telling you to go to the streets and say, yeah, every Nigerian is loud. You go to Oshodi or you go to all those areas, they will beat you. But they just capture it with sense, you know, measure it with sense and be a bit be a bit careful. But Nigerians are amazing people. They would embrace you. They would want to do anything for you. Where do you want to go? Let me show you the way there. You know, just sort of doing those things, right? So they can be your friends, and they're very gregarious, right, in that space. So you can't go wrong with Nigerians. This one, like I said, I'm on the fence, right? Nigerians are accepting, Nigerians are welcoming. I don't know that you guys have seen this, but this is what I have seen. Before the COVID, when there were foreigners, there were people, Nigerians could actually walk up to them for the first time. They don't know who they are, but they'll just say, you know what, hi, you know, you want to see this place? They were sort of welcoming to engage. After the COVID, I keep thinking that the world and Africa has lost a lot of social skills, so we don't socially integrate as much. So things that I used to see were a little bit naturally social, that Nigerians would normally do, you know, socially. After the COVID, I could feel that people were a bit laid back. You know, they wouldn't necessarily go out of their way to do that. So I think COVID sort of took down our socialization standards a bit. The normal Nigerians, you know, you're a new guy that comes into a place, they're like, hey, let's go there. They want to show you, they want to talk to you. But right now, people are a bit more reserved. You might have to make that first move sometimes. You know, Kenya as well, but yeah, that's what I feel. Kenya as well, you probably have to do that. COVID really destroyed us. It really took down our social vibes across the world. We got to relearn that again. And now I'd like to talk about religion, right? Religion and respect and values. Both countries are big on values and religion. If there was anywhere in Africa I was going to raise kids, it would either be Kenya or Nigeria. The values are strong, the morals are strong, kids are brought up really rightly. It's really amazing, right? For religion, for values, for respect. Those two countries, if your kids go there, they're gonna come out really, really great. However, in Nigeria, you gotta be aware that LGBT is not necessarily very welcome. You know, people still have laws against it, you know, and it's in the policy that you can't be necessarily publicly gay. Marriage, you know, amongst the same sexes are not allowed. And Nigeria is very proud about it. They hold on to the values. It's almost like Uganda, right? Saying we don't want to do this. So it's almost like in that bucket, right? So if you're coming in there because maybe you want a little bit of a liberal feel, Nigeria might not necessarily give you that. Does it exist? Are there people that are liberal in Nigeria? Of course. There are people there that are same-sex gender, same-sex marriage, and it's becoming bigger, right? If you go to pockets of circles, you see it there, right? And don't come ask me who are these guys, right? But it is there, right? But it's just not publicly accepted. In Kenya, on the other hand, by law, it's legal. It's not frowned upon. You can't necessarily get married legally, if I remember. But in terms of the value, right, of can you sort of same-sex relationships, it's a little bit more embraced, right? And at some point, I think they even wanted to pass it into law where it was possible to get married, but I think there was some kickback from parliament and from the legal lawmakers, but it's definitely more liberal than Nigeria, right? So if you're thinking about being liberal, going to a place where you can feel free to express, you know, yourself and your gender and what you think it is, you know, then of course that place is, then Kenya is probably a better place for you to go. Nigeria is big on values. We wouldn't play with those kind of things. So it's a bit of like, yeah. So just make up your mind and just be a bit choiceful for where you think is going to give you the best bang for your buck or bang for your sex. You know, yeah. So that's the feel. You know, both countries are big on religion, Christianity, Islam. You know, very pious. It's very pious, right? Both countries, right? So I think those are my views, right? In terms of religion or in terms of liberality, I would give it to religion, and the seriousness, I'll give it to Nigeria, because I think I respect the fact that they hold on to their values and their dignity and what they want to do, and they refuse to be influenced by anybody else. And I think every country has a right to do that, right? But I'll give that round to Nigeria because of that. But of course, you have your choices. You can choose where you want to go and all of that. So boom, those are my views in terms of that space. Okay, now for the verdict, right? I mean, we've been calculating the points and we've been trying to see who's ahead, what country's ahead. I mean, by and large on this one, right? From my view, and remember I keep telling you that I have been to all the countries, most of the countries in Africa. I've lived in these countries. I really want you to trust my objective opinion, but like I said, you might have yours, you know. And if you do, if you negate with me or you disagree, then hey, put it in the comment. Let's talk about it. But I think my views are very objective. And I think on this one, Nigeria or Kenya, I would give it to Kenya. Kenya is a better place to live, a better place to raise your kids, a better place to probably go for a holiday if you're going for like a one-time ticket and you don't have 2 countries to go to and you were gonna like die tomorrow and they said choose 1 country. I would say go to Kenya before you die. You know, you shouldn't die of course, but I would say go to Kenya before you die. So I'll give it to Kenya, right? Again, I think that the middle class can access the level of life that people can't. It's in Nigeria. I think it's good. So I give it to Kenya, you know, so I think Kenya wins this one big time. So get to visit both countries, get to really compare yourself. Like they always say, proof of the taste is in the pudding, right? You got to eat it to taste it, right? So let's keep building the continent. You guys know that my dream for the continent is for us to all be united, to be able to export much more than we import, to be able to create a GDP that is worthy of evolution, and for us to be able to be owners of our own businesses, right? You know, and for us to be able to get support where the world leans upon us, but we get the benefit of that partnership, of that opportunity, where we have great leaders that are looking at the dynamics, where we have people that are thinking more about the consumers and more about the people than about ourselves. So that's my dream for Africa. I think we're closer to it than we were a long time ago, and we just got to keep marching the battle. So guys, I'll see you guys in the next video. Keep the light shining. If you find a brick, do not throw it at anybody. Use it to build a house. Africa is rising and Africa can rise. I'll see you at the next